Hi guys, Scott here. I'm here with Ray today. We're doing a video on how he strapped a Honda to his turbocharger. About the beginning of this thing, how did you get into Hondas, or how did you end up with a huge horsepower Honda Civic?
Basically, I made the change from a WRX. I had a pretty modified WRX back in the day.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted something a little bit different, so I found a couple of YouTube videos, and I was like, wow, these things are awesome. They back half like machines. I'd love to get my hands on one. So 2012, I found this as basically a rolling shell, and got it all up and running. And yeah, this is the final setup that's been in the car.
And you've done a lot of this yourself, because you're a mechanic. You've done a lot of this yourself, which has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been good. It's definitely been a good learning curve. It's good R&D, and it's definitely been quite popular.
Right. I thought you were joking when you said that it drives good, but mate, it feels perfect. So we are definitely getting it. There is some vibrations in here. What's the story? Like, what mounts has it got in it?
It's got a full solid billet mount. There's no bushings in it. It's everything. Like, the engine is solid mounted to the chassis.
So it's got 4 mounts still, front, back, left, right?
It's got 3 mounts plus a solid plate from the box to the traction arm. There you go, Hanson.
Just when you think that it's about to stop, that was only 28 pounds. Man, I can't thank you enough. I can't wait to get in here so we can crack the hood, have a little bit of a look at the setup that's in there, and show us where the magic is, because that felt absolutely unbelievable. I can't wait to get out and have a look. Mate, turbocharged Honda, that's probably one of the most scary and exciting drives I've ever been on. When we've opened the bonnet, obviously it's got a huge turbocharger bolted to your Honda. First things first, I guess, can you tell me a little bit about what this engine actually is?
This is a B-Series B18 that's come out of an Integra Type R.
Okay, so it's factory, it was an Integra, which was that a 1.8 litre engine?
That's correct.
And is this still 1.8 litre?
No.
All right. So to make the power you're making, what capacity is it now?
At the moment, the car is a 2 litre. It runs an 84mm sleeve. So factory was an 81mm. Now we've taken it to 84mm.
Right, and that's how you're getting the extra capacity. Is there any stroke in it, in the crankshaft as well?
Yes, we've gone from an 87mm crank to an 89mm crank.
So when you're putting sleeves in an engine like this, what are the complexities with that? Like, have you been having trouble holding it all together?
The biggest issue you have when you sleeve an engine is it not sinking and pushing water.
Right, so that means if the sleeve falls down a little bit, you end up with compression and water trying to mix in there.
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's inside this particular engine?
Yep. So believe it or not, it still runs a factory Honda crank, which is out of a B20. So it's an 89mm crank. It runs a set of BME aluminium rods, a set of Speed Factory Outlaw Race Series pistons, 10.5 comp. It has a custom-made head gasket done by West End Performance, Runs a firing setup, Outlaw CNC cylinder head, full Ferrera valve train, Webb racing camshafts, and its VTEC's been deleted.
So that's a bit interesting that you've deleted the VTEC out of this particular engine setup. Is there any reason why?
Well, we decided to substitute that low-end power for oil pressure.
Right, okay, so because the VTEC system works using the oil pressure, can you tell us a little bit about like how that works or why it's picked up oil pressure?
Basically, instead of a valve flicking on and switching the cam over to a different lobe, we've actually blocked that all off, so it's consistently on a 2-lobe cam at the moment.
Right, so because this has got an oil pressure sensor in it, when it was flicking over to the on and off, like the second set of VTEC cams or VTEC lobes, could you actually see a difference in the oil pressure in the logs?
Yes, you could see about a 10 psi to 15 psi drop as VTEC would come on.
Right, and what sort of, I suppose this has got, like you said, it's got custom made camshafts anyway. They're probably not really ground for sort of the low down power, so you could almost say that this thing is, I guess, always on the VTEC lobe now.
That's correct.
Right, it makes sense when you've got a turbocharger like this. I suppose you can't, you can't have the best of both worlds when you're revving it to, sorry, how far did you say you rev this thing?
10,800 RPM.
Yeah, so you've certainly got a power band that you pushed up a bit higher rather than down low. So that makes a lot of sense to get rid of it.
Definitely.
So to make big power out of one of these Hondas, you need a big turbocharger, and that's exactly what this thing is. This thing, before you go any further, it's a GT42, even though it's got a billet wheel, so that'll make it spool up a little bit faster. GT42 with more than a 1.0 rear housing on a 2-litre engine.
That's correct.
And I know that you need that to make the sort of power that this thing's making. What sort of RPM does it start to come on boost at?
We start to see RPM with the race pipe. It's starting between 5.5 to 6,000 RPM. When it's in street mode, it comes on probably 6.5, 7,000 RPM. Everyone thinks it's a little bit laggy, but we do turn it to nearly 11,000 RPM.
Yeah, so you've got RPM to play with. It's still got 4,000 RPM after it comes on boost.
Definitely.
That's a hell of a rev range. And this dump pipe, how big is the dump pipe and sort of where does it go down here?
Okay, so it's a 4-inch dump pipe straight off the back of the turbocharger. Goes underneath the car to a 4-inch flap valve over here. Basically, it's like a wastegate. As soon as it sees positive pressure in the manifold, it will open and dump exhaust gases out.
And so it awakens the giant.
Definitely, we don't want too much back pressure in there.
Correct. I don't know if we can see down here as well though, but there is a big V-band down here. And before I was spying a little bit and I gave the bumper a little bit of a tap. Tell us a little bit about how this works for when you're racing it.
When I race it, basically I just disconnect the V-band and put the side pipe straight out of it.
Right, so the exhaust is a 4-inch when you're racing it that goes from here straight out the pipe.
That's it.
Otherwise, you've got a couple of stickers on there to make it streetable again.
Yep.
Yeah, love it.
Okay, so this is an Outlaw back door speed factory intercooler. As you can see, the actual pipes come out from the back.
Right.
That's the reason why they call it a back door.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It gets, basically the air goes through here, gets cooled through there, and goes up to a 3.5-inch pipe all the way into the intake.
And you've got a couple of plasma clamps here as well that make it pretty easy, I suppose, to bring it on and off. So even with all that intercooling in the front, you've still managed to squeeze a radiator in the front here that's a little bit smaller than I suppose the factory one was, but it looks like it goes down a bit, Way. Can you tell me a bit about like what is this out of?
So this is a half-size Evo radiator with custom end tanks
Oh,
to suit.
Kind of simple and just works, I suppose. It's got a nice braided line in the top. What have we got? So is there a water pump or something down here, or how does the water circulate?
That's correct. It runs an electric water pump controlled by the Haltech. So as soon as I turn the ignition on, fires it straight up.
Perfect. And that water pump, I suppose, if the engine gets like hotter or colder, it pulses at a different rate.
That's correct, yeah. So it adjusted speed via the controller inside the car. And you know, if I'm running it flat out for a while, just turn it up a little bit to circulate a bit faster. And you know, if I'm cruising on the street, doesn't need to be full blast, so just turn it down.
So even this little radiator does take control of the temperature and the cooling system pretty well.
Very well, considering it's only got one fan on there. I don't see temps over 80 degrees.
So underneath the header tank, I can see that it's got a couple of sensors. What are you using those for?
Okay, so the first sensor in front of you is a coolant pressure sensor. So I monitor coolant pressure just to keep an eye on everything, how the head gasket is sealing, how the cylinder head's doing, how much we're putting into it tune-wise. And the other one's just a temperature sensor, basically to control the water pump.
Okay, so the pressure sensor is an interesting one in the cooling system, and you mentioned that you're sort of using that to see how well the head gasket is actually sealing. What sort of pressures would you expect to see normally, and what pressures are you scared of?
I'd be a little bit concerned if I started to see anything over 14 psi. I normally, comes off the dyno, it normally sees probably 5 pounds, 6 pounds.
Right, okay, and I suppose when the cylinder head starts to lift and you're starting to lose compression into the cooling system,
Yep.
what would a really big failure be? How much pressure would you see on that sensor?
75 pounds.
Right, so it'll probably max out the sensor and then that's it, you'll end up with water everywhere.
Definitely. It'll pull that 18 psi or 31 lbs
Yep.
cap straight up, straight into the overflow, and it'll be water everywhere.
So once we get past the intercooler, past the radiator, through the header tank and the catcher, through the intercooler pipe, we get to the inlet manifold. What sort of manifold have we got, and what throttle body are you using?
Okay, so we've got a Skunk 2 Pro racing manifold. It runs a 90mm throttle body. It's got a 2 litre extra spacer on there. When you buy these out of the box, they come 3.5. By putting the extra spacer in there, it increases the actual volume of air to the intake manifold, and now it's 5.5 litre.
Further down, it's got into the runners, you've got a bunch of injectors up the top. What sort of injectors are we using, or what's the fuel system up the front here?
Okay, up the front we run a twin feed -8 line all the way in. We've got 4, at the moment we've only got 4, but we will be switching them out to another set of 4. 2200cc injectors. We will be later on down the track putting an extra set of thousands in there, just so when we drive it on the street, it's on the low side, like the 1000 side. When it actually comes on to boost, we'll switch it over to the 2000s.
For sure. So at the moment, it's got, like you said, the 2200s, but we'll go to a staged setup later on. So you've got 8 injectors that all run sequentially. And the only other thing that we've got down the back here is you've got a fuel pressure regulator here. That pretty straightforward. What sort of base fuel pressure are you using in this?
Base fuel pressure in this car is 65 psi. It's got a sensor on there. It's all got its fail safes. As soon as it drops, I think below 10 psi, it will pull the car straight into a limp mode, and that saved my car, or saved my engine.
Right, so that's been like a fuel supply problem.
Yep.
And what you've sort of said there is that, so if it's got 65 pounds of base fuel pressure, if we put 50 pounds of boost in, the fuel line pressure will end up at 115 psi. The pressure across the injector stays at 65, but if it falls down 10 pounds less to 55, there's simply less fuel going in the engine. So
Definitely.
The tune is going to be different, and that's when a meltdown happens. So I'm pleased that the engine protection has sorted it out once or twice. So to feed your 2200cc injectors at that fuel pressure, what sort of fuel system have we got in the back of this car?
At the back of the car, we've got 3 Bosch 044 fuel pumps, which are staged. So basically at a certain PSI, another pump will turn on, and then at another certain PSI, the other pumps will turn on.
So the Bosch 044, the old tried and proven pump.
Tried and true, mate, tried and true.
They just don't die.
That's it.
Staging them's a really nice idea, because that way you've got one 044 pump that runs at idle, so they're fairly quiet, and you're not recirculating all that fuel as well, which helps. Where if you had 3 pumps running flat out all the time, you've got so much fuel getting bypassed and heated up for no reason. So the staging is a really good way to do it. So before we get to the power this thing makes, the ignition system up the top, looks pretty simple. Tell us a bit about the coils and what sort of plugs or plug gap you're using.
Okay, so it runs OEM Honda, factory Honda S2000 coil packs. We've got a Haltech sensor over here, the S4 sensor, which is controlled, basically got its magnets on the cam gear. Plugs, we run a Dash 11 at 0.4 gap, and 57 pounds of boost. I haven't seen a breakdown, so it's doing its job.
This is definitely becoming more popular, using a factory coil with a built-in igniter. The ECU fires this thing directly, so very straightforward. You've got a little bracket here that you can just pop off, so servicing is easy and getting to the plugs. It's starting to make a lot more sense.
Definitely.
The thing that we all want to know, how much power does this thing make in its full race trim?
In its race mode, it makes 1,011 horsepower at the wheels on 57 PSI boost.
This poor little 2-litre engine, 1,000 horsepower at the wheels. It's just absolutely insane. And you said before that the street trim that you talk about, how much power does it make on the street trim?
Street trim is normally between 700, 750, somewhere around there.
So we'll call it 700, 750 horsepower. And what's the difference between the race and the street trim?
Race, we run a side pipe. It runs more boost and a bit more of an advanced timing map.
For sure. And then for the street,
it's tamed right down.
And it's got the full exhaust system on it.
Correct.
Well, Ray, thanks so much for bringing your 1,000 horsepower 2-litre Honda down for us to take a bit of a look over. Mate, it's an absolute credit to you that you've built something like this, that it holds together, and that you can drive it here in Sydney traffic. Mate, it's an absolute credit. Brilliant job. Well done, mate. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you taking me for a drive in it.
Anytime.
I've never felt anything like it, so
That's awesome.
It was, what an experience. I certainly wasn't ready for that, so I really appreciate it. Guys, as always, thanks very much for watching. That's it for today. If you want to see more feature cars like this one, we've got plenty lined up, so don't forget to hit that red button for subscribe. My name's Scott, and I'll see you next time.